Good day, everyone. My name is Mark Mehta. I'm with iConstruct. Today, we're going to show you a video from iConstruct Carl Faulkner in Australia pertaining to what we call Genus Connect and Power BI. So it's a connection between the two, and some of our clients are using this already. So without any further ado, we'll play the video.
Hi everybody, my name is Carl Faulkner. I'm with a company called iConstruct. I'm the principal for digital engineering and asset management, but I also have a keen focus and keen interest in the AWP and project delivery space as well, and have worked extensively through iConstruct with a number of customers and clients, both in Australia. As you can tell by my accent, I am based in Perth in Australia, but also in the US and Houston and all around the world. I've looked after clients in Asia, in South Korea and Japan, but also the Middle East and Africa as well. So I'm here today to talk about iConstruct and Genus Connect. Genus Connect is the new product from iConstruct, and it's all about really visualizing and creating more powerful dashboards within the AWP space for a project or IWP status reporting and constraint management, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Just a little bit about iConstruct. Obviously, iConstruct has been around in the industry for a number of years now and has been involved in a number of large projects from the AEC space, infrastructure space, and of course industrial projects as well, all the way from oil and gas, mining, petrochem, and large-scale infrastructure projects. So very well experienced within the AWP space, within modular construction and constraint management. And there are a number of major projects that iConstruct have been involved in, as you can see there. Blade, for example, of course, and then quite a number of large projects here in Australia, Woodside projects and what have you. So very well experienced, very diversified. And typically where there is a Navisworks model, where there is a 3D model involved in a project, whether that be from the design, the construction, or the asset management stage, iConstruct may typically be involved at some stage, purely just because of the power of Navisworks, of course, but also iConstruct Pro. So who is iConstruct, and really where do we sit when we talk about advanced work packaging and 3D models in general? iConstruct Pro is the original product from iConstruct, has been around for a number of years now, and really that's the foundational piece when we talk about model management within any project lifecycle. So if there is a 3D model involved in a project and they're looking to standardize that model across all the different systems that they're ingesting and federating the models together from, then reconstructing some of the foundational model conditioning tools from iConstruct Pro are really vital in setting up that model for success when we look at some of the downstream processes like work packaging, for example, or AWP and work pack status reporting and constraint management reporting and all sorts of things. So iConstruct Pro is vital to that process. The next being Control Panel, and Control Panel is really around visualization of constraint management, and then enabling the user through the use of Navisworks to then create IWPs or any work pack for that matter, but obviously we've spent a lot of time in the installation work pack space based on the different data that we're ingesting and aggregating together from project control, engineering, material, schedule, progress measurements, all sorts of things, to then make a more intuitive decision when it comes to creating IWPs, and then obviously compiling the data associated to it. The next piece is Genus. Genus is iConstruct's cloud-based solution. So as you can see on the left-hand side there, iConstruct Pro and Control Panel are both add-ins to Navisworks. But then once we want to push into a more collaborative environment, Genus, utilising Autodesk Forge as that viewing platform, is really where we've headed. So, once you've created that work pack, for example, using Control Panel, once you've conditioned the model within Navisworks, then you can push that model up into Genus, and then of course collaborate, review, share, comment, measure, do all the things that we typically do in a collaborative environment, utilising a 3D model within the project space, and that's really where Genus is. Status capture on site, for example, is very powerful within the Genus space as well. And then really the last piece, and really that's, that caps off the lifecycle solution, let's call it, is Connect. So Genus Connect, currently utilising the power of Power BI, is really giving the end user the ability to now push that 3D model and the geometry back down to Power BI to then integrate into their dashboard reporting. So whether that be constraint management, whether that be status reporting, it doesn't really matter. Dashboards are everywhere these days, and the world really does revolve around BI dashboards. And now once we have the opportunity to include the geometry into the reporting, it enables us to make more intuitive and insightful decisions and really contextualize what the objective or what the messaging we're trying to pass across within that dashboard, especially when it comes to AWP. So let's walk through the process to go from the Navisworks model all the way through to Power BI and creating a dashboard, and then understanding how we actually pass the data from one system to the other and where they actually connect. So first, let's jump into Navisworks. So you can see here I've opened up a session of Navisworks Manage. What I might do quickly, I might just drop in the original model just to give you an understanding of where we can start from and then where we can end up. So this is an existing PDMS model, typical federated site model, project model. There are many different file types in here, RVM files, NWD files, DGN. There's some recap point cloud data in here as well. There's all sorts of stuff. And in reality, it's very hard to manage when you've got varying levels of structure and varying properties and all sorts of things, and file types as well, for example. So what we do in first instance, typically when we look to manage models and geometry within the Navisworks space, especially using iConstruct, is to run the reconstruct tool. And what that does, that actually allows us to clean up that selection tree, standardize. But not only that, but also allows us to then slice up, areas and break large NWD files up and change colors and do all sorts of things. So it really allows us to condition that model for all that downstream processing. So what I might do, I've already run the reconstruct tool. So what I'll do now is I'll drop the new NWD file in, the reconstructed NWD file, and you can see now the selection tree is nice and clean and neat and tidy. It's not based on file type, there aren't separate RVM files in here. And you can see in this instance what we've done, we've grouped the model, or we've structured the model based on discipline and then based on tag, for example. So in this instance, you can see we can go to the CWA, so that's the construction work area, the CWP, which is the discipline, of course, and then the tags associated to that. And you can see the mechanical and the piping aspect as well. From there, what we can do, we can look at how we can actually add data to that object. So you can see when I select this object here, we have some metadata associated to it, the work pack number, the equipment number as well. And we can use the data link tool to, of course, add that on, and that's what I've already done. So once we have appended and data linked on the metadata, say, for example, the tag, the work pack number, any other properties that we would like to embed on the object within the model. And we don't have to, by the way. We can build a lot of those relationships now within Power BI, and we can actually decouple the properties and the metadata from the object, and then do a lot of that relationship building and associating properties back to the object within Power BI if need be as well. So the next thing we need to do is export the tag or the linking attribute from the model and from the geometry out into a database or into a table. So we can use the export data tool to do that. So if I go to the general configuration under iConstruct Pro and go to export configuration, I can then go refresh properties and I can build a new template or configuration. And in this instance, I would like to export out the iConstruct name and the equipment number as well. So you can see here we have iConstruct, and I'm going to export out the iConstruct name and the equipment number as well. I can export out any property. I might export out the work pack number also. I'm going to export that into Excel. However, you can see we can export that straight into SQL, into Access, or into CSV. So there are many options when it comes to the file type in which we're looking to export out. And as I mentioned in this example, we'll export out the Excel spreadsheet. I will actually look to group the data by iConstruct name in this instance. So I will select the group, and And that will group all the objects that have the same iConstruct name, which is the iConstruct name. So that's that component name there. It'll group all those objects together in the one line item within that table. So it'll reduce a lot of the duplicates as well. And then I'll hit save, and I'm going to call this iConstruct name to keep everything consistent. Great. So once I've done that, I've saved that template. I can now close that, and I can now export that data out by selecting everything, of course. I can go to my export data, and I have my iConstruct name, and I can export that into an Excel spreadsheet or into a data table. And that really allows me to build the relationship or the link between the model and the data table or the report or the dashboard that we're looking to build within Power BI. So once the data has exported out of Navisworks using iConstruct into Excel or a table, you can see what we've done here is we've exported out the iConstruct name, the equipment number, and the work pack number. Now, one thing that we do need to consider when bringing this data into Power BI is how we link this line or this object or this data table to the geometry. One thing we need to make sure we consider is naming and adding in the right structure of that property. So one thing we've done in this instance, we've just adjusted that and added the column in. That's the way iConstruct and Genus Connect identifies that column as being our linking attribute, and also the tab and then the property name. That's how it's structured when we look to build that connection within Power BI. So let's save that now. You can see we've got the iConstruct name, the equipment number, and the work pack number, plus it's grouped the objects together. So we don't have duplicate objects, for example, and everything's unique, which is very important. However, there are many different ways and means of going about that. I'm just going to delete that out. So once we save that, so I'll just save that in a moment. So step one is exporting the data out of Navisworks. Step two is then actually uploading that model into Genus. So let's jump into Genus now. So I'll just open up a new Chrome session and sign into Genus. And so now what I'm doing is I'm launching Genus, and I'm going to go to my project. So this is Genus. So this is the next product that I was talking about right at the start of the introduction. So the great thing about Genus, you can have multiple projects, multiple jobs in those projects as well, and then multiple models within that job. So there's a great way of managing the models. You can have multiple levels. It's account-based as well, so I can add additional users. I can remove a user. I can only allow a user to be a viewer, for example, or an editor, or an admin. So there are many different ways you can invite multiple parties, whether that be a client, or an engineer, or a workplace planner, to actually view and access that data. So here I've got this industrial project, which is the project that we've been working on within Navisworks. And when I select the job, it then launches that job. And you can see now we've got the model, which is very important. So you can see here we've got the model, and look and feel, it's exactly the same as Navisworks. It's not different at all. So it's a great way of actually collaborating and pushing that model into the cloud. And there's plenty of different use cases in which we could start to use Genus and understand how we can bring value through that. But today we're going to concentrate on the Power BI piece and pushing that back down to Power BI through the Genus Connect custom visual, and then obviously building out dashboards and tables from there. So once we've pushed the model into Genus and obviously it's processed and become available, the next thing we do is actually bring that back down into Power BI. So I open up Power BI. You can see I've actually built an existing dashboard or report. What we're going to do is we're going to actually build a new report, and then I'm going to come back to this one, and I'll obviously talk through how a more complex dashboard is related and some of the other bits and pieces that we consider as well. So I'm just going to minimize that. I'm just going to open up a new session of Power BI, and then we're going to start to work through loading the custom visual, defining which model we want to view, and then creating an association and color coding and going through some of the other features and functionality and some of the options we have when looking at Genus Connect within Power BI. So I've loaded up a new session of Power BI now. The next thing I'm going to do is load in the Genus Connect custom visual. So if I go to import, you can see here I've got a custom visual, Genus Connect for Power BI. I open, and now that loads in that custom visual file, which you can see here, and then I'm going to open that up. And now you'll see that it opens up a new, really what it is, it's an embedded session of Genus within Power BI. You'll ask for a token. So what I do need to do now is go back to Genus and just grab that token. So I'll just go back in here and get token, and I'll copy that to clipboard, and then I'll jump back into Genus and I'll just paste that in so you can see there, and now that's saved. So that acts as my credentials. So that actually uses my login details based on that widget or that code, and it also defines the model in which we're looking to display, or the widget we're looking to display within that custom visual as well. So it's pretty quick. So now we've loaded the model. It'll just finish loading. You can see now it'll just finish loading, and you'll see we've got some of the features on the left-hand side from Genus, plus some of the Forge functionality that you typically see within most Forge products. So, for example, properties, there's a selection tree or a model browser. So similar to Navisworks, if I just move this to full screen, and I know we'll build out a visualization in a second, but you can see now if I want to navigate to the piping, I can actually use the selection tree or the model browser to then navigate to different equipment tags or assets or whatever it might be, within that model browser. And this is all through Power BI. So very simple, easy to use interface, much easier than Navisworks, of course, and still intuitive enough in which people can go through and work out how to view and filter and do all sorts of things. Plus, choose their own adventure when it comes to how they want to present some sort of outcome or objective, which obviously is the most important thing of BI. So let's talk about how we connect data sets now to Power BI. So the first thing we do need to do is bring in the data table, and we're going to use the Excel workbook or get data. It could be either, of course, but in this instance we use Excel workbook. And I'm going to load up my my spreadsheet that I've created before. So that's in here and in here. So I've got one here, and what I might do, I might just open this spreadsheet up a second. Now this is a little bit bigger than the one that I built or I exported out from Navisworks. And it just gives you an example of the varying data sets that we can start to now introduce into that relationship, or build relationships between the different data sets, and then relate them back to the geometry within Genus Connect. So, for example, we have the project control data, which is vitally important. System data for commissioning, testing, all sorts of things. PDMS data, so the engineering, the asset data that's created within the CAD system. Procurement data, work pack components, so more itemized material management data. So if we wanted to relate, material management to procurement, to system data to project control, right? So all these different disparate systems and data sets within that project delivery and in that AWP space, we now have the ability to connect them all together, utilizing the geometry as that central point and that connector, which is vitally important. So in the project control data, you can see we have the work pack number, the start date, the end dates, some of the variables. So does it require scaffolding, a resource density calculation? And that's the great thing about starting to introduce geometry into a lot of the decision making, and space and location. Now we can, for example, calculate density, resource densities, scaffold requirements based on Z values of objects within the model as well. So if a Z value is greater than 3 meters or 5 meters, for example, it requires scaffold, tag counts. All these are clashing as well. So obviously, if you're performing clashing activities within Navisworks and you want to translate that across as a constraint, when we create our constraint management dashboards, then that's another opportunity, right? So it's all about relating the geometry, and a lot of the decision making we do within the geometry back with the data tables and the project controls and the engineering data that we typically do within other database systems, right? So it's a way of bringing that all together and connecting it. So you can see I've got quite a lot of data here. Most important thing, of course, as I mentioned before, is the iConstruct name. So that's my linking attribute between these tables and of course the geometry. So let's go through how that works now. And as we all know within Power BI, it's not just Excel, but we can connect to SQL databases, Access. So I'm just going to bring in all these different tables now, and we'll start to work through and build out different different visualizations. So I'll just quickly review them, make sure the headers are correct. That's also an important thing to consider. So they all look pretty good to me. So I'm going to press load now, and that'll load all that data in. So back what I was saying before, the great thing about BI is the fact not only do we have to connect to Excel spreadsheets or CSV files, but we can also connect to an SQL database. There are other options as well, which are a bit more intuitive. SQL databases, web OData endpoints, for example. And if you go to more, there are other options in here as well, which I think are of real value. So, when we start to look at some of the other services that are available, so Amazon, for example, PostgreSQL, there are so many SAP HANA, for example, SAP, Oracle. There are just so many examples of how we can connect to different data, Azure as well, for example, if that's where we're running the data. Okay, so once we've done that, the next thing we want to do is just quickly connect the data sets to the geometries. So from there, we want to go to our piping system data. In here, we have our linking attribute. In this instance, the linking attribute is the iConstruct name. So if I just quickly zoom on to an object and select the property browser, you'll see here there is, and I'll just expand that, of course, you'll see our iConstruct name, and that's my linking attribute. So I'm going to drop that into the property to match to field in the visualization configuration. And then I'm also going to use the work pack number, for example, as my color coding property as well. So now you can see I've color coded the geometry based on that work pack number. Right? So it's a quick, easy way of color coding the geometry from an external data set. And then you can see as I hover over, there's a tooltip, a typical Power BI tooltip. So when I hover over an object, you can see what the iConstruct name is and also the work pack number that's associated to it. So that's quick, easy, simple to use. And then we can start to bring in all sorts of different visualizations and then obviously start to get creative with how we can build out dashboards and visualizations and what have you as well. So let's jump back into the original Power BI AWP constraint management and dashboard and status report that I built previously and start to talk through some of the use cases and some of the ways we can relate this back to the AWP space and how it can bring value, how it can provide value. So I'm just going to jump back into my previous dashboard here, and you can see some of the examples in which we've brought in. So I've just color coded the piping, the piping work packs in this instance, but of course it could be any discipline. It doesn't need to be piping. It could be mechanical, structural, electrical if you've got equipment modeled, of course, and the concrete as well. And one of the great things is just identifying what is within a work pack. So if I want to see what objects are within a work pack, for example, piping work pack 07, I can then select that, and that'll obviously zoom to and show me the objects that are contained within that work pack. And then I can also go to my settings within Forge and ghost hidden objects, and you can see now it'll actually just ghost out the objects that aren't selected, and then I can go back and select that, and then actually that will remove and hide all the objects that haven't been selected. So there's an optionality there when it comes to visualization in the model as well. It doesn't just need to be on and off. Another great aspect is the legend, which I think is very handy. So if, for example, we have all the work packs shown and you just want to see within the model space which objects are contained to what work pack, then obviously that's another great way of visualizing that. And then let's say I want to now go to this work pack here, but then I also want to understand what the systems are, so the separate systems are from a turnover perspective or from a commissioning or a testing perspective. So what I can do is actually change the property in which we're color coding by. So I'll move that up, and you can see now it's actually changed the colors, and the legend has changed as well based on the system. And now if I change that back, you can see now it's changed the legend and the color code on the model back to just the work pack. So maybe this work pack might be easy to see. So once again, I just want to see what systems there are within that. So you can see there's the yellow system, for example, the blue and the greens. So you can see the different systems within the work pack through changing the property in the field and actually being able to do that on the fly within Power BI as well, which is great and very handy. Great. So once we've done that, the next thing we can do is start to work through some of the other aspects of the custom visual and Genus Connect. One being the slicer. So we have the ability to integrate the geometry isolation or selection with some of the slices or the slices as well. So let's say we just want to see what work packs are being built within a certain date period or time period. If we go to our Genus Connect configuration or format, and then go to Genus configuration, we have here the isolate sliced data. If I turn that on, you can see now it's actually just showing or displaying the work packs that are contained, or the objects that are contained within that date range. So if I now come along and adjust the date range, you can see now it actually adjusts the work packs that I can see within the visual. So I've run out of days there, so I need to move the other one, for example. And you can see now, I'm sure that'll go down to 1 in a second. So you can see now I've added another one. So it's a great way of and you can use obviously slices in many different ways within Power BI. One being dates, of course, and there are other ways and means of using it. So that's one great example. And then, of course, as I mentioned right at the start, the ability to turn on the tooltip. So I can see now if I hover over an object, you can see I've got the name, the work pack, and the system, all available through a tooltip and hovering over an object. So if I zoom in and I want to see what system that object is contained within, then obviously I can do that through just hovering over that as well. Another aspect is, of course, once we've created our IWP packs, we may have drawings, documents, site work, specifications that we want to access and associate to objects. We can obviously build links, URL links and icons within Power BI as well. So, for example, I want to go to this object here, so this ISO here, for example, and I want to then, understand the system. What's the document status, the labour status, the procurement status, plus the man hours. Does it require scaffolding? And this is where we can aggregate and consolidate all the different constraints associated to executing that work pack in the path to construction, obviously within that one space. And the great thing is, no longer do you need to have all the different data sets within one area or within one table. You can now have them in separate systems and separate tables, and then build the relationships within BI, and actually relate it back to the geometry when you need to. So let's say I want to look at the drawing associated to that object or that line or that isometric. I can obviously select that object option there, and that'll bring up the isometric. So that's just another BI function that is available. But once again, there are subsequent features and options that we can start to include now, because we are integrating with Power BI, and not necessarily being limited to just doing it within Navisworks, for example. So that's another great example. And if you do want to turn the tooltip off, then of course we can go back and turn that off, and to also turn the slicer off as well. So yeah, there's plenty of different options. There are many different ways and means we could build out different dashboards. Constraint management is one, so understanding which work packs require scaffolding, which don't, based on a Z value, for example. So we can get such or labour constraints, material constraints. And it's just an easier way to actually digest and consume that data, especially for non-technical people, people who aren't necessarily CAD or VDC type people. They can obviously relate to this. It's a much more intuitive interface than in a CAD system, for example. So there's many different advantages there. Another great aspect of it, so some of the Genus tools have also been brought down to Genus Connect. So, for example, I want to now select similar and select the isometric. I could do that as well. So there are many different features and functionality within the Power BI component. So not only is there constraint management, we can also there are also different use cases around clash management, turnover and system. And you saw before, I built a few system, or you can relate a system color coding and the legend back to a work pack. Statusing, of course, is very popular. So we want to see material movement and the status of material movement, or the status of construction, and installation, even hazards. There are many, or plant equipment. So there are many different use cases and how we can relate different data sets, disparate. And of course, the great thing about BI is the fact that we can build out all the different relationships to each other. And then obviously we can perform different calculations and queries and perform different activities within BI as well. So that is where we're at, I guess, from a Genus Connect perspective. And when we're relating it to AWP, one of the best things is obviously that status reporting and that constraint management reporting and the path to construction visualization. But not only visualizing, but making it a bit more intuitive and self-configurable when it comes to relating both the data and all the different data sets within a project and back to the geometry as well. The great thing about this is nearly everybody in the business now knows how to use Power BI. So typically people will want to interpret that data in different ways. And that's really the great thing about this is once we understand how to connect the model and the geometric objects to the tables, then really you can allow any user to build out whatever dashboards they need to based on the objective at that time that they're trying to achieve. Whereas we don't necessarily need to pre-build all these different dashboards that take days and days and weeks to build. If you provide the end user the model, the conditioned, cleaned up model that is hosted in Genus, and then give them an understanding of how to connect their data sets to the model, then really we can allow all different users of all different types and skill sets to an understanding and different roles within the business and the project as well to develop their own dashboards, but still getting the power of geometry and data, and that's really where we see the future of digital engineering going in this current state is really cleaned up cloud-based collaborative models, but relating back to a BI interface for powerful insights, for example, in the AWP space, like constraint management, handover management, system turnover management, testing, commissioning, and even work pack management when it comes to contents, and even we're seeing a real appetite of this in the asset management space as well. So obviously once we hand this over to the operations and the asset management, they will look to use this in their own way. So they will look to interpret use cases in their own right, and those use cases might be work orders or inspections, or maintenance activities. So when do we need to maintain something and how often? Or even from a time series data perspective. So, we have IoTs or production data associated to different systems. We now want to visualize the production data or the time series data to the systems within the project or within the asset as well. And that's the beauty of this is, you can configure it, or we can configure it for one specific purpose like AWP, constraint management, status reporting, material management, whatever it might be. But then the good thing is we have a digital asset that we can then hand over to the operations from a maintenance perspective, and then they can reinterpret that for their own purposes and their own objectives. So today we've gone through the process of taking a Navisworks model, a native PDMS model, reducing it and restructuring and conditioning that Navisworks model, and slicing up a smaller CWA construction work area, for example, and restructuring it by CWP and then asset ID or tag, pushing it into Genus to then convert or translate that NWD file to a forge model, in which then is in more of a collaborative environment, and then obviously passing that back down to Power BI. So then we can build out more intuitive dashboards, whether that be work pack management, project control, or statusing as well. So there are so many other options in which we can start to introduce Power BI, and that really complements and finishes off that whole workflow when we talk about AWP and dashboard reporting. That's really the flow, and that's the process. And it's very straightforward, very easy, fully configurable, and there's a lot of value in actually going through that process. So let's take a quick look at Genus. Genus is iConstruct's new cloud-based solution in which we have the ability to uplift a model from Navisworks, for example, and push that into the cloud, and then actually convert that to a Forge model. And this is obviously the first step prior to pushing it down into Power BI. But first, let's have a look at Genus and understand a few of the different opportunities and different ways and means we can add value and get value from Genus, which is the iConstruct product. So as you can see here, we have two aspects of Genus, one being the table on the left-hand side and the other being the model on the right-hand side. The beauty of this, obviously, the table is fully configurable, so we can create any data sets and tables and lists within the table on the left-hand side, and obviously we can build a relationship between the table on the left-hand side and the model on the right-hand side as well. So in this example, you can see that I've listed the work pack numbers, so the same work pack numbers that we saw within the Power BI report, but now I've actually pushed them into Genus, into the table on the left-hand side. Now when I select a different work pack in the table on the left-hand side, you can see that relates to the geometry in the model view on the right-hand side as well. And that's very easy to set up and very easy to configure. So when you can, and the visibility or the navigation is configurable as well. So not only can you select the line item or table, a list in the table on the left-hand side and view just the components of that work pack, but you can also remove the isolate, for example, and change to highlight as well. So there are many different, and you can see now that the objects contained within that work pack have been highlighted. But I will change it back to remove that and isolate. And you can see now when I select the different work packs, they obviously relate to the other side. Now, if I wanted to create a new work pack, for example, I can then select an object that I think is in the work pack and go to my select similar and say work pack. That will then select the objects that are in the same work pack. I can then right-click on those objects and create record from selection. By doing that, that creates a new work pack record or a new component in the table here. And you can see it takes the work pack number actually that's on the object, and it gives me the different inputs or columns headers that I can add data to. For example, approved by, I won't add anything in there, but man hours, for example, if I had man hours, I wanted to add a date, for example, punch list item, punch list comments, status, for example. If I wanted to add a work pack document, I could do that there as well. So I've pressed save. That will then create that additional record within the table on the left-hand side. So you can see now I've created that additional work pack. And that was really that was simply from the selection of an object in the model, selecting the similar objects that are contained within that work pack, and then adding that or creating that record into the table on the left-hand side. Now, once I've done that, you'll see I've added that additional work pack in here. I can then show all, again, and bring all the components back within that project or that CWA. And then the next aspect is obviously the ability to color code. So if I wanted to color code based on status, based on work pack, based any property, any column in which I have within my table here, and you can see I've added in all these different columns, whether that be a work pack name, a planned start date, a status, man hours, punch list items. If I wanted to attach drawings, for example, or if I wanted to workflow that to a specific approver, you could do that as well. And you can see now by selecting the color code tool on, it's now actually color coded the model based on the status. But I can actually change that color code and I can adjust that to, for example, the work pack name. And this is fully configurable, by the way. So I can change that to the work pack name. And now this will re-color code and re-override the colors within the model based on the work pack name as well. So you can see there, and then I can actually change that back and go back to my status instead. So, so that's very simple to use and it's very quick, much simpler than many other products there. So you can see another aspect is we can obviously go to the different components of this table as well. One being the charts, so similar to what we did in Power BI, but in this instance what we've done now is we've created pie charts based on any of the properties within the table, and you can see now, for example, handover. And when I select the different sections within the pie charts, that obviously relates to the work packs or the objects within or the geometry within the model space as well. And it's fully configurable. You can see how you do status, man hours, what's happening on the same start date, for example. And then if I wanted to bring everything back, I could just select all, and that'll bring everything back. And the last aspect, of course, is the timeliner. So if I wanted to now, similar to what we do in Navisworks, in Simulate and using the timeliner, we can do the same thing within Genus, and we can obviously work through a timeliner based on installation date of the work pack, for example. So you can see as I move through the different dates, it corresponds or relates to the objects contained within that model, and then it displays those objects based on that date. And this slider is adjustable as well, so I can change the slider, for example, and that'll of course relate to the objects or the work packs that relate to those dates. So it's a great way of simulating the construction sequence and obviously visualizing that within the model space. So that's very simple to use, and all we do in that instance is select a date column from the table, and then obviously that then feeds into the timeliner functionality. So let's go back to the table now, and the last thing I will talk about or talk to is the ability to create a new table or another table. So in this example, I have one table for the work packs, and then in another table in which I've created, we have a list of all the project control data. So really what I've done is I've imported an Excel spreadsheet of the project control data, and that's very easy to use or very easy to do. So all we need to do is just go to the import option here, and then drag and drop the Excel spreadsheet into there, and that will actually populate this table. And you can see all the project control data associated to this project here. The great thing about this, we may want to start to review the model in different hierarchies and different structures within the table. So for example, I may want to now review the model and review the geometry based on subsystem. So I can take the subsystem column header and I can move that up into the filtering panel. And you can see now if I collapse groups, it's actually grouped my data set or my table by that property. And as we know that the table is directly related to the geometry, if I were to select any of the actual systems that I have grouped here, it will then obviously relate to the geometry, and then I select that, and you can see it just selects or isolates the objects contained within that system. I may now want to take another property and group as well, build out that hierarchy. So for example, I can take the work pack and I can move that up into the filtering panel at the top. I can then collapse groups, and you can see now I can go, for example, work pack and then system. So if I select this here, you can see that is a work pack, and then I can actually expand the system, for example, and you can see now that is a subsystem contained within that work pack. So when we talk about hydro testing, commissioning, the different aspects of the work packaging process and the construction process, we do want to interpret the geometry and view the geometry in different ways and means based on what we're doing at that time. And we don't necessarily want to reconstruct or restructure the selection tree each time we review or interpret the model, but we actually may want to just use the data set in which is relating to the geometry and actually filter and regroup the data in the table side of things. So it makes it quick, easy to use, and much simpler to re-query, let's say, or query the geometry based on the table on the left-hand side. Not only can you do that, we can of course also color code on all the different tables. So for example, I may now want to color code based on subsystem, so I can hit save. That will then, and obviously turn that on, of course, that will then color code the model. So this is quite a large model, but that'll then color code the model based on the different systems. And then, for example, I can now pick up that system and I can drag and drop that up the top there again and collapse. And you can see now I may select that system there, and of course that's color coded that system, for example. So yeah, it's easy, quick, and very simple to use. And that is Genus. So Genus, just to summarize, Genus is iConstruct's new cloud-based solution. It's a combination of Forge and the model space, and obviously the ability to build out self-configurable tables that are completely customizable. You can filter those tables, you can add geometry and objects to different groups within those tables. You can color code and report, and also create simple timeliners, associated to, for example, the different groups that you have created within Genus as well.
Hi, this is Mark Mehta. I am not Carl. Carl is asleep because he's in Perth. Hopefully we can get the Slido going and see what kind of questions we have. Miss Leslie, do we have anything?
You do have a question in, if you see your questions pane.
Okay. All right, so is there a direct API to the model? Is there a way to direct access the model? So what's going on is the model is viewed through Power BI. So it's a live look at the model in Genus, and Genus is built on the Forge platform. So it does provide that, it does provide you an actual look at the model. And then you have the data tied to the geometry, and you have your work packages tied to the geometry, so you can see everything you need in real time. And then one of the things we often talk about is the configurability of it. So when Carl first showed me some of these demos, I thought of the same question that people ask me, is that, you know, well, that's not the information that I want. Well, you can, it's all configurable. You can decide how to do, how you want to, what information you want in the Power BI report. So several clients and people that we work with, including Autodesk and others, have been rather excited about this, especially with the ability of making your own Power BI reports. So one of the things that we do talk about is that if a lot of people, a lot of companies have the ability to build their own Power BI reports, it's purposely designed to where people can make their own reports as well. If you don't have the appropriate personnel to make your own reports, you can work with us as well. We'll help you with that. We can teach you how to build your own reports, or we can build your reports for you. And of course, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Can Genus be hosted on-prem? So Genus is part of Forge, with strictly cloud-based. So I would think the answer to that is basically no. And it's one of our clients asking the question, so we can talk about that in more detail as well with our developers. But Genus is on Forge, so it's cloud-based, so it's not really going to be in your environment. However, we have we work with so many different clients, and a lot of our clients are actually on the webinar right now, and some of them have more stringent IT protocols than others, but we have also we passed all IT protocols, so we shouldn't have any issues with it being hosted on Forge. So we have a question from the one of our favorite AWP people in the world, Mr. Mark Lambert. Does Genus allow data links to other source files and the ability to update if the source file is updated? Yes. So with Genus, then the information that the primary information that you're going to have is going to be from the model. Now you can tie it to other information as well. So within Genus, and then we also have Power BI. Either way, you can hook it up to multiple source files. So to say it in a more construction-orientated way is that you're going to get information from document control, a document control report showing what's IFC'd and what revision number is at. You're going to get a report from progress measurement. You're going to get a report from turnover, a report from materials. So they're all going to be a little bit different. And yes, we're going to need, as planners and doing AWP executioners, we need all that information. So we will have the ability to link to multiple source files. Absolutely, yes. And that's going to be a very important thing that we do, because within construction, we have so many different departments. They have different purposes. They all have their own software, and they every piece of software sits on top of a separate database. So it's very important, as Mark indicated, Mark Lambert, that we are able to read information from multiple sources. So from a technical point of view, it's multiple source files. From a construction point of view, it's going to be from multiple departments. Now, from a technical point of view, you can take information and combine it together and try to parse it out yourself. However, it's beneficial to do it the way Mark Lambert indicates and read multiple source files. What else do we have? So comment from Mark. I like the key concept, using data key and then relating all of the other data based on a common key. So that is one of the keys to our newest software that we're offering now, the AWP control panel, in that you define the primary and secondary. And we didn't really get into that in this video. We have implemented AWP control panel on multiple clients. We help them configure it, but the key to it is this, and we didn't talk about this in the video, but you define the primary and secondary. So what that means is that you don't have to decide across all disciplines what your key component is going to be. Say, for example, pipe, if you choose to, you can make the primary the ISO and the secondary the spool. Or if you're doing fabrication, you can make the primary the spool and the secondary the fittings that comprise the spool. However, when you move the foundations or steel, you can change that concept again and say that, say within steel, you can have your primary as the sequence and the secondary is going to be the piece part numbers. So what's the key to it all is the configurability of it, in that we don't determine what information we're going to key off of, you do. We'll help you implement the process, and with every client we work with, it's going to be a little bit different. So at this conference, we're talking about AWP and there are standard AWP processes, right? So when we work with a client, though, one of the big keys to AWP is that every client is going to be a little bit different. So we're very adaptable and we're very configurable. We can work with clients in terms of seeing what your specific requirements are on your site. So AWP is a universal concept, but one of the things that we see in the process of implementing AWP in reality on a project, on an EPC with an owner, is that everyone's going to do things a little bit differently, and we need to have that room to wiggle and that configurability. That's something that we have discussed at EPCs when we implement the AWP process, and it's also something that we discussed within CII, and that it is not one size fits all. In the session we had earlier today, a question came up, is that can you use AWP on $10 to $20 million projects? The answer is yes, in brief, but there's more to it. You can't take the entire 272 and put that on a tiny project. So you do need to adapt it for that process. And that's something that we're extremely big on, is that one of the things that we say within software is that configurations are good, customizations are bad. What happens is that if you get software that's beneficial to you, but you say, hey, well, I wish it would do this, that, and the other thing, then you go to the software vendor and they customize the software just for you. Now, when you try to upgrade the software, you have customizations in the old software that don't transfer forward. So that's where it's paramount to have the concept of configurability. So we can, from a model point of view, we can take information from you for all disciplines and define how you want to build your packages. We don't dictate it. We support your process. And the same thing with Power BI and Genus, in that Carl showed some neat things in his video. However, all that is configurable. None of it's out of the box. We can supply basic reports to you, and we do, but for a more elaborate report, it's going to be what you desire, not what we we'll give you recommendations and we'll give you a template to work with, but we don't make decisions on how you configure your data or how you run the project or how you run the AWP process. It depends on the client. lots of clients that we work with have a defined process, and we fit within that process. And some of those clients are on this webinar right now. We have other clients on this webinar right now who came to us and said, hey, can you help us implement AWP process as well? So it depends on the client. The key is configurability on everything you saw. So what other questions do we have? To reiterate, we have the old software is called iConstruct Pro, which most people are familiar with. That's for model conditioning. It is a plugin to Navisworks. One of the things that we're often asked is that what file types do you work with? The short answer is that we can open any file type that Navisworks can open. A little bit more important answer, a better answer, is that we work with S3D, we work with E3D, with PDMS, we work with AutoPlan, Revit, IFC files, Sys2 files, IDF files, PCF files, yada, yada, yada files. So it's extremely, it's very good for taking information from multiple sources and multiple file types and giving you one resultant NWD that's more appropriate for, that's more construction configured, if you will. And a big part of that is federating that model. It's combining all those different models from different sources in one place. Now we have our new AWP control panel, which we didn't really talk about a whole lot, but again, it's a plugin to Navisworks. And then we have what's very important to a lot of people is cloud-based. So we have our Genus platform as well. Now, what Carl has been showing you, and I just got an email while the presentation was playing, someone else would like say, let's get some sample models up and running. When we gave this presentation to a couple of our clients and a couple of the companies that we work with, they jumped on it as well. But that's going to be our Genus Connect and the Power BI aspect to it. So we build packages and we want to track constraints. We need to make sure that everyone's aware of the status that we're in. We want to make sure that everyone can see constraints, see how many hours per package, what the status of the package is. But it just helps out tremendously to get a cognitive aspect of it, is to see the model, is to see the package in the model. So this is something that you can have at your desk very easily as just a view only, as a published report, where you can go into a Power BI report that's already made. You can click on packages and see the hours associated, field materials availability, and see the package in 3D space as well. As you saw from Carl's video, you just click on it and it goes. And then also something that we do in the field quite a bit is when we have meetings, when we have a workplace planning meeting or AWP meeting or a coordination meeting, it helps out to have that 3D model on the projector so everyone can see it and we're all talking the same language. So what happens is that unfortunately you're going to have a defined system in place. Someone has a separate system on top of it somewhere else, Excel spreadsheet, then you have two sources of data. So by having everything in Power BI and having it tied to the model, you have everyone speaking the same language and everyone looking at the same data at any point in time. So it's very helpful for coordination, and the visual aspects help out as well. But a big key is going to be about the configurability of it. So what other questions do we have? Any? We have 2 minutes. Support schedule integrations, yes. So that's a question we're asked often. Out of P6, there's a standard report, which we're quite accustomed to reading in. From there, we can get the activity IDs, the start and finish dates and descriptions, and read those in as a property into the model. Now, we are asked with our previous software, existing software, iConstruct Pro, do we have a 40 capability? The answer is that with iConstruct Pro, we relied on Autodesk Timeliner, the Navisworks 4D simulation. We helped that process in creating the sets that go into it, but now with our Genus platform and with AWP control panel, we have our own timeliner so you can see the model getting built as well. So we have always had integrations with P6. In terms of building a 4D model, we've improved upon that quite a bit. So we did rely on Autodesk Timeliner, which worked quite well, extremely well, very configurable. A lot of clients used it, especially iConstruct helped make the process easier. But in terms of integrating with the schedule, something we've done quite a bit extensively. I've done it on projects, and we help our clients do that now. So thanks for the question from Trillium, and nice to see Trillium here. I enjoy the articles that we see from y'all. I see things are going well for Trillium, so I'm glad to see y'all partake in our presentation. And it is 12 o'clock, so we're going to give you a little lunch break, and then we'll get back into our main sessions.